So I was wondering, how much and how often should you write?
Shit. It depends on the person. Maybe it depends on what they're trying to get done. If it's to meet like a quota, like if you're a journalist, probably that. Depends how much you love writing. If it's to get all the stories out before you die prematurely, I mean, as much as possible. Personally, I write every day. I write every single day. I don't really have a word count. I used to aim for 1, then 3,000, and now with this quarantine going on, I write a lot, like 8 to 12 hours a day usually. It's a little concerning actually. I try and exercise, I try and get out for my health, but I wouldn't stop if someone didn't tell me to. Even on hardcore editing days, I still find myself trying to scrape forward with a little something that I'm working on. I take time off. I go on vacation. I usually take notes, but I don't write. I just focus on trying to soak in the ambiance. You know what I mean? Try and clear the head, act like it ain't a thing, and then just kind of come back fully recharged. For instance, the 3,000 words a day, I got that from the Stephen King books on writing, where he says he bangs out 3,000 a day, just goes for it, and then he takes his break. It could take him 2 hours, it could take him 12 hours, but that is his routine. That is his idea of the perfect amount of writing. And a lot of writers, I think a lot of people, but especially writers, if you look at people like Hemingway, Gibson, damn near anybody, they're all very routine-based people. They all tend to do the same thing every single day. Writing usually comes first. It's first thing in the morning. A lot of them are early sleepers, but they treat it like work. When you read their memoirs, they call it work. They call these up at 5 a.m., have breakfast, go to work, and that work for them is writing. I don't want to be like, I don't think of writing as work, but I guess if you're getting paid by a publisher, it's definitely work. There's no formula, I don't think either. It depends where you write, how you write. If you write at home, that kind of gives you a little more freedom. If you can't write at home, if you use a coffee shop or somewhere else, then it's definitely going to be a little more challenging to get that perfect kind of environment. But someone said, I can't remember who, that if a writer waits for a perfect environment, they would never write a word on a page. So that's fair. It depends if you work. If you work, that tends to limit your amount of writing time, and depending how much you work, but that can also be a good thing. That can also stop you prematurely. That can also stop you while you're in the full head of steam, and that can give you an incentive to pick up, to take notes, and to hit it again. Having that feeling of never quite being full, almost like that intermittent fast where you're not quite full yet, but there's still more to go, and you're still excited. You still have a lot of juice in the limbs, you know. A lot of writers are pretty proud people, and they're fairly loath to tell you that they never don't have something to write about. I, for one, agree with that. I always have something to write about, and generally you don't have to force it. It just kind of comes. It's something that you're thinking about, something that revolves around your world, and by the time you sit down to write about it, you write till you're spent. In my opinion, you write until you can't write anymore. You write until you notice things getting sloppy. You write until things are starting to break apart and fray at the end, because you can always go back and read it and then edit it. Editing is a huge process, bigger than the writing. I think you should write every day and try to write what's in your head. Try to write something that is going through you. If you're not in a story, just sit down, pick it up, and let it fire. And then write until the momentum's gone. When I wrote Becoming Buddha, that was the first book I'd ever written. Oh, coming in July 2020. How about that? I had to get myself in a routine. I know that I'm a routine-based person, so I made a pledge to sit down and write 1,000 words a day for a month. And after a couple weeks, I started getting into the groove. I started getting excited. I was like, oh, I can't wait to go writing. I'd cut myself off, and then I started noticing that the ideas, the planning, the whole structure, the way that I came to frame the style of which I tell a story, started pushing it to 1,500, 2,000, 2,500, 3,000, and it kept going and going and going. And that's not to say that it was all good. A lot of it was shite. 100,000 words of that book got cut, more or less, let's say. But it was there. I was teaching myself. I was ingraining these behaviors in me. I was learning that patience. I was learning that that self-discipline that it takes to turn off your phone, to sit down and write, to dedicate hours to doing this. And you latch on, you kind of internalize it, and you find yourself becoming more able to write. I have a story now that I'm working on. It's part 4 of this series that I'm hopefully going to release whenever. It's a beast. It's a big story. A lot happens. It's a very crucial point in the series, and very much the climax if you were to draw it out. There's a lot of things that happen, and as a result of having all this time, I've been writing a lot. 4, 5, 6, 7,000, maybe 8,000 words a day, just sun up to sundown. I'm finding it a little unhealthy, like I said before, because I missed so many things in the middle. I was heading to major point, to major point, to major point, to major point. And the difficulty with that was that I was missing these little nuances, these little things that make your book, these character profiles, these traits, these little side stories, these cool little avenues that you might explore if you have more time. Because if you limit yourself, if you don't write until you're absolutely gutted, then you have to think about this. You think about the previous 1,000 or 3,000 or however many words you did in the course of the rest of the day, overnight. You wake up and you're like, oh, I forgot this. I'll go back and reread, and then I'm going to put all this in. It's a lot easier to reread 1,000 or 1,000 words, 1,000 or 3,000 words, than it is to go back and read 5, 6, 7,000 words. And then the amount of things that you have to put in there starts to stagger you, or you eliminate whole chapters, or you save this for later. I was frustrated. I went on a couple walks where I was kind of kicking myself, thinking how I could change this, but I didn't want it to feel like stress, because while I just said I didn't feel writing as work, writing should also never stress you. It almost makes me feel like my soul would be hurt if I thought that, but that's how I was looking at it. It was something that I couldn't really grasp. I had to go back, read it from the beginning. By the time I was at the 5th chapter, I think I'd already added 5,000, 6,000 words, separated things, vivisected it, took pieces apart and put it on an operating table, have this for later, delete that, change everything up. So I kind of shot myself in the foot by overwriting. But at the same time, I wanted to. It was something that I felt I had to do. I was excited to get up and to start working on it. So if you're starting out, maybe limiting yourself or setting a goal to try and get a certain amount of words might be perfect. Whereas if you're long in the tooth and you've established your routine, the thought of writing until the last part makes sense, writing until the last part leaves you more, does make sense. That finishing that section and keeping yourself wanting, keeping yourself engaged and ambitious to finish the story. You can write till you're spent, and then you can spend the time going back to look at it as well. There's no right or wrong answer, just to do what you feel is best for you and for the story. Make sure you're treating it with respect and not skipping over it and doing a half job. You can push through, you can lie back, but at the end of the day, it's your story, and how you approach it is going to show in the final details.